So this is going to be another off-meta build guide, and we're going to be looking at the Elementalist, which is really interesting because it's not considered very good in the meta right now. And the reason for that is because Elementalist is an 11,000 base health class with cloth armor, which is the squishiest it gets in the game. So for it to be meta, it really needs to have some kind of bruiser spec that's viable. So it really prevents fresh air and all those other kind of like staff archetypes from being meta because they're too squishy. So usually what people do is they'll run like dagger, or right now they're running like sword dagger. So it's kind of like these bruiser specs that often become meta to make up for the base weaknesses of Elementalist. But I'm coming up with a few interesting and fun builds that can somewhat survive the meta and kind of have an interesting look at the class. So the first build that I'm going to show you guys is a Air Tempest. And this is especially interesting because Tempest is usually thought of as a healer, and Fresh Air is usually thought of as either maybe a core or a weaver spec. So it kind of melds those two ideas into the same. Well, it's not really a healer. This build is more of a roamer. It does have some team supportive capabilities. So let's go over the build real quick. So I'm going to have Scepter Focus with Exploitation and Separation, so just going for as many damage modifiers as possible. And Marauder's Amulet with Eagle Runes, so more damage modifiers with the Ferocity there. And you'll see in air I have tons of Ferocity with Fresh Air, Aeromancer's Training, and you'll also get a lot of Fury, which gives you more crit chance and more value on your Ferocity. So yeah, I don't go for Ferocious Winds because I do want to keep that Fury uptime pretty high. You'll get Fury from critically striking, but this is on a 3-second ICD, and you only get 2 seconds of it. So you want to keep your Fury uptime really high. And you'll notice here, you also get Ferocity while under the effect of Fury. So if you don't have Fury, then getting Ferocious Winds isn't really worth it, right? Because if you have Fury, then you're going to be getting Ferocity, which is kind of like the same effect as Ferocious Winds, but then you'll also have higher crit chance. So it's like this trait actually ends up being more damage increase than this one, in my opinion. And it also gives you some nice swiftness. So, and I'll explain a little bit why, how you get the auras in this build. So, yeah, you take Aeromancer's Training. You could take the Glyph trait because that would make your heal skill like 4 seconds less, but it's really not as important as taking Aeromancer's Training because you want that Ferocity, and you're going to be in air attunement for most of the time, so you're going to want to be spamming your 2 and 3 skill off cooldown, and not having Aeromancer's Training makes them a little bit longer of a cooldown, right? So this is now a 4-second cooldown instead of a 5, which is really nice because this skill actually adds up in damage after a while. So it's pretty nice. And Fresh Air, which makes kind of like the whole overloading attunement worth it, because when you overload, right, it puts your attunement on full 20-second cooldown instead of a 9-second cooldown. So when you swap out of air, then it will immediately recharge air attunement when you crit. So it makes it so that the setback of overloading attunements doesn't really come into effect, but only for air attunement, right? So it'll, for earth and fire and water, you'll still get the 20-second for overloading, but you won't be overloading them that often. So in water, I'm taking Piercing Shards, which gives you a little bit more vuln duration. You're going to be getting plenty of vuln with Overload Air, and there's Electric Discharge when you attune to air, you'll give some vuln. So vuln duration is pretty nice. You could go for soothing ice as well, which is nice because it synergizes with Zephyr's Boon, so it'll give you more fury, and that will happen when you get critically hit, and it'll give you some damage reduction. But that's up to you if you want to go for that or you want to go for piercing shards. Personally, I've been liking piercing shards because you can usually what I'll do is when I go into my air overload, I'll swap to water before I swap back into air overload, and I'll pop like a Shatterstone and a Common out before I go back into air, and those can do some decent damage. So 20% damage increase while in water can give you some nice bursts, but Soothing Ice is probably going to be a little bit more reliable, to be honest, because it'll give you that fury. So, I mean, to be honest, you can go with either one. And then I have the Cantrips trait, which gives you reduced recharge on your cantrips. And as you can see, I'm taking 3 cantrips, and it gives you regen and vigor when you use a cantrip. And that's really nice because you're not taking the vigor trait in Tempest, so you don't really get vigor other than from this trait. And it gives you regen, which scales with cleansing water. So every time you use a cantrip, it will give you a Condi cleanse as well, which is nice because this build actually ends up having a lot of Condi cleanse on it, because you have the Focus 4, which gives 3 Condi cleanse. You have the Water Attunement, swapping to that and then pressing the 3 skill will give regen, which gives a Condi cleanse. And then sometimes, like, you can use Glyph of Elemental Harmony in water and give yourself a Condi cleanse as well. But if you're going versus like a Condi comp, you can actually take the Cantrip Heal, which is Ether Renewal, and that's kind of a clunky skill because you sit there and channel for a while, but it cleanses a lot of Condis, and it goes on a 14-second cooldown with the Cantrip trait, so that's really nice. But if you're going versus full power comps, I found that Glyph of Elemental Harmony is going to be better. So yeah, there's that. So you got plenty of Condi cleanse with this build, and it's really nice having the Cantrip trait because Lightning Flash is one of your big playmaking skills, and having it on a lower cooldown just feels really good. So, and obviously I'm using Mistform, which is now a 48-second cooldown instead of a 60-second cooldown, so you have a lot of survivability and prevention of being killed. And obviously Armor of Earth is a cantrip as well. And last we have the Tempest trait line. So I have Unstable Conduit, which gives you an aura when you overload. So you're basically only going to get the Air Attunement, which gives you Shocking Aura, which is really good too, to be honest. So like if you pop Overload Air on top of someone and they try to counter pressure you, right, they're going to get stunned in your Overload Air and it's going to really hurt. So that's really nice. I wouldn't take anything else there. Harmonious Conduit gives you stability when you are overloading, and when you finish overloading, it gives you a damage buff of 10%. So that's really nice because you're going to be overloading air a lot, so it's going to give you a little bit more stability uptime than most Tempests will have, and it allows you to kind of ensure that you land that big damage skill. And then last, you have Elemental Bastion, and this will give you a little bit of healing when you get auras, and it will also give you a Frost Aura to nearby allies when you are struck below 75% HP. And that's nice because it also procs Zephyr's Boon, which gives Fury to your allies, right? So more Fury uptime, right? And a little bit of healing here and there when you get auras. You basically only get auras from Air Overload, right? Then you have Fire, which you can use Fire Shield, and that'll give you Fury. and then yeah, the passive here, and then you can take Soothing Ice, so it's decent fury. Another thing that's really nice in Tempest is you get increased protection uptime, and this build actually gives you a little bit of protection with Armor of Earth, and if you really need to, you can overload Earth to get a little extra protection. And obviously you can use Rock Barrier here for the 250 toughness on top of that, and just never use it so that you keep the toughness increase, which 250 toughness is actually pretty good, so that's pretty nice. And so kind of the idea of the build is you want to be casting overloads on air, and then casting cantrips, which are instant cast skills like Lightning Flash and Armor of Earth, while also using instant cast from your scepter like Lightning Strike and Blinding Flash. So you can do stuff like this, and while it's happening you're just spamming stuff like that, you know, and then you can swap out and swap back in immediately, and then you want to start using your overload immediately as soon as possible. You can do a play like pour it on top of them and then put it there and knock them down in it. And then so the big combo that you want to be doing is you want to kind of like precast your overload air, and then once it finishes you'll get Harmonious Conduit, right? And that's a 10% damage increase. And then what you're going to do is you're going to immediately swap to Fire Attunement or Water, and then you'll use one of the burst skills there. So like if I went to fire, I would use Phoenix, and then while Phoenix is mid cast, you'll swap back to air, because the air attunement is going to be off cooldown because your overload air is going to be proccing crits, and then you'll swap back to air and you'll get the fresh air proc, which increases your ferocity by 250, and then also gives you the ferocity from being attuned to air from Aeromancer's training, and that'll make your Phoenix hit for a lot harder, as well as with the Harmonious Conduit buff, right? So you'll do something like, and this is the medium golem, so you'll do like this, and then like that. You can do a lot of damage to a target, and obviously they can easily dodge that, so you can kind of time it to land on them, and then you knock them down, and then that ensures that the burst will hit with the Phoenix. So that's kind of what you want to do. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So you have Rebound as well, which gives Fury, so it's more Fury uptime, and an Aura, which is more Fury uptime, so that's really nice. And that's kind of decent for supporting allies, but it's really not that good. But for the most part, like, you're a pretty survivable build, because you have Invuln from Mistform, you have the Invuln from Focus, and then you have Stability and Protection, which is 40% higher. You have plenty of Condi Cleanse, you have 2 stun breaks technically, you have a really nice escape with Lightning Flash. The build is just very kind of sturdy for a DPS build, and that's pretty nice, because that's kind of how, when you want to theory craft a build, that's kind of like the checks that you need to have is you need 2 stun breaks, you need Condi Cleanse, and then you need some way to survive being outnumbered, right? So this is a really nice build in my opinion, and it's really fun too. You can do some cool combos and make some nice plays, and even support your allies. It's not like one of those selfish builds, right, where you feel like your teammates don't really like you on their team. Well, being a fresh Air Tempest, they don't really like you on your team anyways. It's, if you play it correctly, they will like you on your team, because you can provide a lot of damage and support at the same time. So in this match, I'll be against 2 Hollows, and Hollows right now are pretty strong in the meta, But one thing is they're very projectile based, right? So they use a lot of like spammy projectiles from rifle and like their static discharge in their tool belt. But Fresh Air Ellie, even as Tempest, has like tons of projectile hate, right? So the swirling winds, the focus 4, and even if I overload Earth, that'll give me a Earth aura. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I can do. I mean, it's not like I hard counter them because they can go in melee and hollow form still, but it's actually pretty decent versus them. So yeah, in this immediate team fight, like I'm just trying not to get instantly one-shotted, right? So my finger is ready to press that misform button and the invuln on Earth, which is really nice because like yeah, and I give a little bit of heal to my teammate there off the side. I mean, I can give a little bit of support, right? It's a DPS build, but it also can support, so it's pretty interesting. And here, I blind that jump shot while I'm overloading the attunement, and we get some nice kills here. But we need to get sides, right? We won mid, and this is usually the case in solo queue, right? You win mid, the enemy team has already left mid, and they go to win sides. So like you have to snowball at this point. So we got to go for kills and get far. And the NG is using a bunch of their abilities. I don't know why I dodged when I have stability, but he's pretty much going to die out of stealth. And that's another thing that's really nice about Fresh Air is that I know that he's going to dodge, right? But I can time my Air 2 skill in between dodges and there's no animation, right? So I know that I'm going to land my damage after he leaves the form because I can just time it after his dodges or in between like evade frames or stuff like that. That's why Fresh Air Ellie is so kind of like busted or uninteractive, right? Because a lot of his damage is no animation. So that's, I mean, welcome to Guild Wars 2. So yeah, at this point, got my resustain, we've got far, but we need to get into mid, and home node is kind of like a 1v1 situation. But I'd rather get kills on these hollows because they're a pretty valuable asset to their team. So we get this kill, and I'm just gonna cleave it out with a Dragon's Tooth because it's, I mean, this is their node, right by their spawn. So you don't want to bleed people by their spawn because they could just respawn and res that. So, and now their next hollow is right here, and I have to be careful here. I do get the knockdown, but they immediately stun break, so I have to be careful here. And they go into rampage, and I try to be greedy with my cooldowns, but I take a huge crit there, and I have to invuln and blink away. But the thing is, I still survive the rampage, right? So that's really good, right? Surviving rampage is really good because if they just kill you with rampage, not only is it like really punishing to you because your teammate dies then, but you know, they don't have to do much to do it, right? So at this point, I'm taking the 1v1 with the hollow. I get the knockdown and the nice Phoenix. He's at half health. He's really pressured, and I get my swirling winds. He goes into hollow form, which is counter to my play, and I actually tank the Prime Light Beam very stupidly because I think, oh, I have stability. I can just get Prime Lighted and greed for this overload air. But yeah, I should have dodged that Prime Light Beam 100%. It's kind of like stupid that Engineer can do that much damage with like ranged abilities that are relatively easy to spam, but I mean, he comboed it with like a bunch of static discharge projectiles, right? But I probably could have survived there, right? Like if I just didn't greed for my overload or use line of sight better while overloading, right? So Yeah, that was kind of a misplay. So coming into mid here, they have the Hollow and their Berserker. I knock the Berserker down and immediately do my Phoenix combo on him. And then I put Swirling Wind on the body so that basically the warrior is ineffective in his down state, right? Because the only thing he can do is projectiles. And I see the Hollows re-engaging back on the mid, so I want to go on that. And I pop a bunch of my instant cast abilities, and then I blink onto the Hollow with my Overload finishing. And remember, Blink actually does damage, or Lightning Flash actually does damage, and it's pretty decent damage, so it's really nice to use as like a comboing move, because it adds more damage to your combo to Lightning Flash on them, so that's nice. And here I'm just putting up Swirling Winds, and that actually prevents their Berserker's Sword Burst from actually doing anything here. And just like seeing how useful Overload Air is in these big team fights, because it just ignores Z-axis, it goes everywhere, right? So you can like kite on terrain while casting Air Overload, and it actually deals pressure to everyone. And just like for an ability that you're going to be using all the time, it has very little counterplay to it, kind of, in a way. So like, I mean, that makes the build good, in a way, because that's, for a build to be good, it has to be kind of like uninteractive in some way. If you allow your enemies to react to what you're doing, then they're just gonna be better than you with their uninteractivity. So yeah, this build is actually pretty good. Like the instant cast and then the overloads, while you're casting the overloads, you can do the instant cast. So it does a lot of damage, that's for sure. And it's actually a very fun build, to be honest. Like, it may not be the most viable thing, but it feels pretty good in some matches. Like the survivability and the damage that it can do, it feels more of like it doesn't fit the role. It's actually more of like the Hollows role, where like it can't like 1v1 too well, but it survives in a lot of situations. It 2v2s well. It can make plays with the invuln stomps like Elixir S. So to be honest, it's actually kind of like Hollow Light, to be honest. So that's kind of nice. And it has definitely more utility, right, with the rebound and swirling wind, projectile reflex, and stuff like that. So that's nice. At this point, Far is a 1v1 with another Hollow, and I put up my projectile reflect, and I see the Berserker, so I immediately leave. I try to do a big like decap play here, but it ends up not working. So I have the stun break. Yeah, I've wasted a cooldown basically there, so I'm out of a lot of my survivability for nothing. And at this point, I want to play not too greedy with my cooldowns, right? But I do want to waste as much of their time as I can. I go back into the reflect, and I'm in Earth again with my rebound. So I've got another aura, like I've got Earth aura as well. So I'm reflecting again, and I have my invuln ready as well, and I can use that. And I have blink as well. So I pop the invuln right when they're just about to jump on me, and I tried to blink on the ledge, which would have actually been insane because I would have survived there and baited them down while I port back up. But I actually tried to port to the handrail, which you can't port to. So yeah, that was a huge mistake that I could have survived and gotten a lot of value out of that kite off node. But it's fine because I kited long enough for my team to get some map presence, and we can just go into mid and get some kills for our team. As you can see here, the enemy Mirage, while they have a lot of dodges, it doesn't really matter against Fresh Air Ellie because all of my damage is instant anyway, so it's so easy to just time it in between their dodges. So it's like kind of good against Mesmers, and like Ellie usually gets countered by Mesmer, right? Well, at least not the bunker Ellies. But you understand, like Condi Mesmer usually would counter like a Fresh Air Ellie very easily, but I have plenty of Condi Cleanse, and my damage is very hard for them to avoid reliably. So yeah, the build seems really like this is definitely one of the better Ellie builds in my opinion. And we come to the we go to the bell, right? And this is insane because like on this map, Skyhammer, and on Capricorn, right, the secondary objective is a node that you have to cap. So it forces people to stand on the node more than they normally would, right? Because if they get decapped, or sorry, if they get full capped on it, right, there's no coming back, right? They lose it. Whereas like in a normal fight, if you get decapped or something, or full capped, it doesn't matter because you can win the fight and then get the cap right after. But as soon as someone gets the full cap on the secondary objective of this map, right, it's over, right? You've won that. Everyone leaves, right? So putting as much pressure on the node with air overload as possible forces people to die, basically, because they have to stand on the node to contest the objective, or they get off, right? So it is a really nice zone control ability, the air overload. And here I'm getting chased by 2 hollows, and I can just disengage with blink and Z-axis here, and swirling winds here. He's actually he tried to rampage me. Both hollows are on me still, by the way. I don't know why they're tunnel visioning me this hard. I have my invuln and reflecting right now. I actually swapped out of Earth without using the invuln, which is kind of like super greedy. Yeah, I'm gonna die for that. Like, I could have used the invuln and I would have survived this completely. So huge mistakes from me this game on survival. So, but like, you understand all these situations I could have lived. So like, you see the survivability of this build is actually pretty high if I just don't make mistakes. That's not realistic. Like, of course you're gonna make mistakes, right? But those are pretty big mistakes that I'm making, right? Just not using an ability when I can clearly use it, right? It's not like saying that this build is very hard to play, right? It's actually not that hard. It's actually pretty forgiving build, which is also why I think that it's so nice, because that's like the idea of build crafting, right? Is if the build is hard to play, it's probably not meta, because then like for your build to be played, it's too hard for you to make use of your build while also reacting to other people's builds. That's how meta builds usually work, right? They're sort of easy-ish to play because the skill in playing Guild Wars 2 is not playing the builds. It's reacting to the situations, like reacting to the other builds and reacting to rotations, right? That's where the actual skill comes from. So this is actually a very meta-appearing build, in my opinion. So yeah. Here the Berserker is just gonna get trained by me. My auto attack in air actually does a really decent amount of damage. And I see the hollows creeping up on me. I put the swirling winds preemptively. I could have knocked down there, but I assume they had stability, but they actually didn't. And I have the Tempest protection, right? The Tempest protection is 40% power damage reduction, so that's really nice. Even for like a non-tank build, right? So that adds to the sustain and the survivability of the build even more, right? So the second hollow jumps on me, and I put up the reflect, and the hollow actually tries to knock me back, and they knock themselves back because of the reflect. That's just justice right there. But yeah, so that's the Fresh Air Tempest build. So while Tempest has 2 other builds that I've shown before that were kind of like healer, or like Dagger Focus and Staff Tempest, that last one is pretty interesting because it's more off meta, right? So we're looking at builds that aren't really accepted as meta, but the idea and the theory craft behind them makes sense, and it kind of works because it uses those key things of, you know, a little bit of survivability, a couple stun breaks, and, you know, it does its role and has some kind of synergy. This build, on the other hand, is kind of weird because it is a core staff Ellie, and staff Ellie, while is really good on the Tempest build, hasn't really been used so much as a DPS spec. And that's because, you know, you have to have people stand in your AoEs for it to be useful. But I feel that this build is probably as close as it can get to a staff Ellie being viable in PvP. While I don't think this build is viable, I think it can be a lot of fun for you to play. So let's check it out. So I'm using staff with cleansing and separation. So just separation for the, you know, damage modifier, and then cleansing to add to my Condi cleanse on this build, and then Rune of Fire and Marauder Amulet. And you'll see why Rune of Fire is going to be good later on. And you'll see it gives power, a bit of might duration, and then it gives Fire Aura when entering combat, gives increased damage by 10% while Fire Aura is active. And so we'll look at where all the Fire Auras come from in this build. So whenever I swap to Fire Attunement while in combat, I'll get a Fire Aura for 4 seconds. So when I enter combat, that's 4 seconds. When I swap to Fire, that's another 4 seconds of 10% damage. And when I use a Conjure weapon, I get 5 seconds of Fire Aura. So, and that's when I pick it up, right? So that's really nice. And my ally, if an ally picks it up, I'll get Fire Aura too. So it's really nice. The uptime on Fire Auras. So it's almost not permanent, but it's pretty close to a really high uptime of Fire Aura, which is 10% extra damage. And yeah, I have Smothering Auras as well, which whenever I gain a Fire Aura, it will cleanse a condition from me. So that's kind of where my condition cleanse comes in this build, and kind of makes this build feel close to meta, because it has Condi cleanse. It can react to builds that deal Condis to you, and even power builds will do Condis, right? They'll do poison, they'll do weakness, and removing Condis just by, you know, doing your damage rotation and shrugging it off without really having to think about it is kind of nice, because that's, you know, it allows you to focus on what you want to do rather than, oh, they put weakness on me, now I gotta do all this other stuff, right? So it's pretty nice. And then lastly, the Blinding Ashes trait. Whenever I inflict burning, it'll also inflict blindness. So whenever I have a Fire Aura on me, if they're within a certain range, they will, well, let's see what the range actually is. So I'm pretty sure the range on auras proccing effects is pretty small, right? But anyways, if they're close enough in range and they hit you, they'll be blind, or they'll be burned, which will make them get blinded. And that's really nice, because classes like thieves and stuff will want to jump on top of you and prevent you from free casting, right, as a staff Ellie, and you can kind of peel them off you with those blinds, and that's pretty nice, right? So like if a thief steals onto you when you have Fire Aura active, they'll get blinded and they'll like miss their attack that they steal into you, right? Because say like the thief has Larcenous Strike ready, right, and you see that, you can go into Fire Aura and then they'll steal to you. That'll put them in range of you, and then, you know, they'll get blinded and then they'll miss their Larcenous Strike. So that's pretty nice in my opinion. Because this build is very susceptible to thieves otherwise, right? So that's pretty nice. And then I go into Air and Arcane. So in Arcane, I'm going for Arcane Abatement, which is gives you some extra effects. It'll give you like a static field, which you'll see in Air is kind of nice because of Lightning Rod. And then it'll give you a knockdown, which is also nice because of Lightning Rod when you're in Earth. And then in Water it gives you cleansing, and then in Ring of Fire it gives you just some burns, which is nice, right, because of Blinding Ashes. Then whenever Arcane is such a good trait line, because whenever you swap to any attunement, it'll just give you a buff, right? And swapping to Water gives you a regen, swapping to Fire gives you might, and swapping to Earth gives you 5 seconds of protection, which is really insane because protection is a strong boon, and 5 seconds of it is actually very valuable. So that's really nice. And yeah, because otherwise the build is pretty squishy without protection, so that's pretty nice. And then here I have Arcane Resurrection. I could take Lesser Arcane Shield because I'm kind of lacking on stun breaks, as you can see, but I feel that the Arcane Resurrection is actually really good because you can still, even though this is a DPS build, you can still do double geyser plays and get reses off like that. So that's kind of nice. And it gives you an aura, right, when you revive someone, which can give you fire aura again. So that's really nice. And then I take Evasive Arcana, so whenever you dodge, you'll get an effect that gives you more Condi Cleanse when you're in Water. It will give you Blinding in Air, which isn't really that useful, and then a Blast Finisher, and then in Fire it gives you Burning. Mainly this is just for the Condi Cleanse and extra like pressure when you're dodging around. So it's not that useful, but it's okay. You can take Bountiful Power as well, because you'll have constantly at least Zephyr's Boon up, right? You'll have some boons from Elemental Attunement, and probably Might as well, right? From, what is it? Where do you get that Might? Every attunement. Okay, so you get Might every time you swap here from Arcane as well. So you'll have Might, Fury, and Swiftness, and then like one regen or Pro maybe on top of that. So you have at least 4 boons. So Bountiful Power is pretty good too. You could take that. Either one works, to be honest. So yeah. So the Air trait line, I take Zephyr's Boon, obviously, because tons of auras means tons of Fury and Swiftness. Fury uptime is really good. And Inscription. So instead of taking Storm Soul, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I take the Glyph trait because I have Glyph of Elemental Power, which makes it a 20-second cooldown, and it also gives you a boon, right, depending on which attunement I'm in. It's not really that important, but it'll give me 3 seconds of protection if I'm in Earth, which it's okay, but usually you'd want to be using it in Air or Fire because you get that Vuln or that Burning. And then obviously my heal skill is a 16-second cooldown, so I have decent sustain with this build. And then you'll see I have taken Lightning Rod, and Lightning Rod is really nice because it helps you to supplement your staff damage, because you actually have a lot of CCs on this build. So let's count the CCs here. So I have staff 3, staff 5, I have Earth 4. It can be multiple knock, like multiple damages, right? And then I have Lightning Hammer, which I can do another static field there, and then I can do a Lightning Leap through the static field, which would be a Daze, which is disable, and then I can use Wind Blast, which is knockback, and then I can also go Earth Shield, which has a daze for 2 seconds, mind you, and then a pull, which would be another disable. So I've already lost count of how many disables I have. So I've got a lot of weakness uptime as well. So that's another thing that's really important, right? Is shrugging off, people who are going to try to counter pressure you, right? By giving them, CCing them and giving them weakness. So, and it also gives you a base damage of 800, which is really nice. You can get some really nice burst CC combos off with the lightning rod. So that's pretty nice. And as you can see here, I am running triple conjures. This is, up for debate. I'm willing to go with, a lot of different choices with these, but you definitely want at least lightning hammer and at least conjure fiery greatsword, because you need some kind of melee weapon to use while you're waiting for your staff cooldowns, right? Because staff is very situational weapon, right? It has so many tools to it, but it doesn't have too many for one thing. So if you're going really aggressive on damage, which often this build wants to do, you don't really have many ways to do that, right? You just use the 2 skill in every attunement, you do some CC, but you can't really finish people off unless you have lightning hammer, which is really your biggest damage skill here. So that's important. Earth Shield is just another what's it called? It's another invuln, right? You can use, if you go into it, it gives you 3 seconds of invuln. The 2 skill is a block, which is kind of meh, but it gives you barrier as well. And the magnetic surge gives you a magnetic aura, and it gives you a daze and a leap, so that's kind of nice for survivability. What you can do is you can take Mistform instead of Earth Shield if you feel like you need more stun breaks. It all depends on what you're against. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. You could take Mistform here. You could even take Lightning Flash if you want to go super survivable. But I feel that you need to have that kill potential from Glyph of Elemental Power as well. So that's pretty important to me. And the reason why I take the Glyph trait, right, is because I feel that Storm Soul, while it's nice to increase your day or your stun duration, you don't really do that many stuns, right? Because this is like a knockback. This is like a knockback. This is a stun. This is a stun. But half your CCs aren't actually stuns, so it doesn't actually feel that it's affecting your playstyle too much the way Storm Soul works. And they could just, a lot of times they can just stability, right? And so the fact that you disable them is enough to get the weakness and the damage, but it won't actually stun them, so the duration is irrelevant then. So I feel that this is more reliable. So yeah, kind of the play style of this is, right, you want to go in, you'll do maybe Air 2, the 2 skills on all the weapons are very good, but or on all the attunements are very good, but you'll do something knock them back into that, and then that, maybe that. My fire attunement is running out, so I'll maybe go into Earth, and then I'll conjure a fiery greatsword. While I've conjured that up, I have fire aura, right? And then I'll go into air maybe for a little bit of damage. I'll go back into fire to keep my fire aura up. I think my attunement skills are coming off cooldown soon, so I'll swap back into my actual thing. Now I have the choice of picking up my fiery greatsword again, and then doing some kind of burst play. So knock this back, and then do some damage there, and I can come back here and pick up my fiery greatsword again, swap to Earth for some protection, and then do some damage with the fiery greatsword. And at this point, I can use the And I just went straight into the lightning hammer. I'd probably want to use more, but yeah, I can do stuff like the 5 skill and then the 3 and knock them through that and do some big damage like there. Or I can do the 4 skill with the glyph and do about 10k damage within a really a 1 and a 1/4 second cast time. It does a lot of damage, so that's like the one skill that you want to make sure you land on Ellie. So you do this, and then my lightning hammer is gone. So you put the static field from the 5 skill around them so that they can't escape, or they'll get stunned if they try to leave your 4 skill, and then you'll do glyph and stuff like that and do a lot of damage there. So yeah, that's kind of the playstyle. Just it's almost kind of like Firebrand tomes, right? The Conjures. You'll use a bunch of your weapon skills that you see fit for the situation, and then you'll go into a Conjure to actually do damage, and then you'll continue after you've run out of your Conjure. You'll go back to your weapon skills and stuff like that. So, and then you want to obviously kite pretty well. So it depends on what the enemy is using. You can go for more stun breaks with mist form, or you can go for that Conjure Earth Shield, or if you want, you can go for Lightning Flash as well if you need the mobility instead. So yeah, you can go mist form, Lightning Flash, or Conjure Earth Shield. I really like Conjure Earth Shield, but you have to kind of premeditate that you're about to be hit, right? Because you don't have any stun breaks on the weapon set. You have to do it before it happens to you if you get CC'd. So that's this build. So this build is a little bit on the unviable side of the off-meta builds we have today. So why I say this is because core Staff Ellie is probably, well, it's probably not very good at all. But Staff Ellie, I don't want to say just play support Staff Ellie, right? Because while support Tempest with Staff is actually pretty good, with Arcane and Water, people want to play a DPS Staff Ellie build sometimes. So, there's this thing where you just have to kind of like have fun. So, like, I'll admit, this is not a ranked match. This is an unranked match. And I'm playing, core Staff Ellie in an unranked match. So, yeah, it may not be the most competitive, but, it will show some interesting uses of the skills that you may, or the encounters that you may face as a Staff Ellie. So, yeah. So you want to precast your Glyph of Elemental Power before the gate opens, because it'll usually be off cooldown by the time you get into the fight. I try to do a nice meteor shower with the precast with the 4 skill so that I'm out of line of sight, but I kind of whiff that and I put it in the wrong spot. But basically, yeah, in like a team fight on a small node like this, Staff Ellie is actually insane if they don't chase you. Like they didn't see me because I backed off really quick. If they would have seen me, they would have pressured me, and they wouldn't have sat there and just like tanked all of my damage from the the massive AoEs. That's like the one good thing that Staff Ellie has in Conquest, is fighting people who don't get off the node, right? The ones that stay on the node. So, that's kind of prevalent in low tier matches, right? But so yeah, the Revenant comes off spawn right here, and I actually am pretty fucked here because, yeah. So the Reaper and the Rev just jump on me after the Rev respawns, and I get pulled by the Greatsword 5. So, I mean, this build is pretty squishy. I do get signated by my Firebrand, and that allows me to re-sustain. I have a 16-second heal skill, so if I can kite really well, I can actually be pretty sustainable here. And I re-engage on the Necro with a Lightning Hammer and Static Field. And Lightning Hammer is actually my biggest damaging skill, so I really want to use that when I know for sure I can get the kill. And I move on to try to +1 my Revenant, and I put a nice static field down into my Lightning Flash kind of combo there, and now I can just leave and kind of put some cleave on the down body while I'm leaving, which is pretty nice. You can just set it and forget it. And I can see their Revenant is really low, getting chased off here, so I can also put some cleave on that, and I just Meteor Shower here for no reason, basically. So yeah, we're losing far. I want to go back into there. It looks like they're Necro, so yeah, I'm going to put down my static field and try to knock them through it, but they have stability from the Reaper Shroud, and I'm just going to spam AoE here. My Revenant actually goes down, and I can use the Geyser for the double res there, but the Warrior comes in as well, and I kind of want to be safe. Like I don't have Mistform to go for the insane res, so I precast my 3 in Lightning Hammer on the Warrior when he jumps up on me, but for some reason he lags out and doesn't get knocked off. So this is actually one of the best situations for Staff Ellie is on this map, because there are so many like spots that you can stand in that are no port, and you can just free cast from those. And if they chase you, then you can use a lot of your CC abilities to maintain your vantage point. And as you can see here, I'm just freely raining down Meteor Showers on the node, and we're getting them really low. But my Revenant is really low, and they actually go down, but at this point I can res easily with the double Geyser from Arcane Trait and from Water, and we can re-engage in here, and I get the static, but it misses for some reason. I guess I got corrupted on my Fury, and I go in for the Lightning Hammer finisher again. And now I see that my team is not doing so hot on mid, but they're also not getting far. So I want to go back in there. My Necro is kind of low, and their Warrior tries to jump on me, so I have to be pretty careful here. I see my Lightning Hammer that I could have picked up again. To be honest, like I said, I'm not a good Ellie. If I would have picked up that Lightning Hammer, that would have been really nice here. So you have to remember that your Lightning, all your Conjure, you only use 2 Conjures, but like all your Conjures are going to have 2 casts, right? So, and then I use my Signet or my Glyph there for extra damage, but it ends up not being enough. And yeah, like I could have used my Air too, but I line of sighted myself there as well. So just making mistakes here. I go into the Fiery GS, but the Fear Ring Wall thingy prevents me from getting any cleave there. So I try to sustain the down body with the Geyser for long enough for me to cleave with the Great Sword or the Lightning Hammer, but it's not enough, and I'm gonna die here. So yeah, it is kind of interesting. Like this build actually has a lot of utility to it just from staff, and then the Conjure weapons give you a ton of CC. So as long as you can kite on this, it's actually a pretty nice build. Like its main weakness, right, is you getting jumped on by like a Revenant and a Thief, but if you really want, you can replace Glyph of Elemental Power for like Mistform or something like that, and that'll help you survive long enough. But generally, if a Thief or a Rev are on you, like Mistform isn't going to be enough to help you survive. It's just going to delay the inevitable. So I think it's better for you to have extra damage from like Glyph of Elemental Power, so that when you do survive, right, you can at least pressure back in. And here this is an insane situation because we have a team that has decent sustain, right, with Firebrand, so they can stand on the node and bait the enemy team to stand in my AoEs, right, to contest the node. So that's really nice, and we get some kills off of my Meteor Showers. I try to do a huge Lightning Hammer port into Static Field, and then the Force skill does insane damage even when they're not on the same level as me of the Z-axis, so that's really nice there for chasing kills. So I get the decap on Far. We're kind of behind in this match because we don't really have a 1v1er. Oh, well, we do have a Warrior, but the Warrior's at mid. The Warrior should be splitting their team, like I said. So yeah, their Dragon Hunter is coming in here. And yeah, I just want to pressure from afar. This is pretty much an easy kill because we have our Scourge pressuring that as well. I don't really need to do too much there. And that's nice because I don't need to use my Lightning Hammer, which is now coming off cooldown. So I can chase this kill. I'll probably want to... Okay, the Fear Wall prevents me from chasing, and I don't really have much I can do there. Oh, so what I did there was I jumped through the Fear Wall, and then I immediately aura'd, right? Because auras cleanse. So that was pretty nice. Usage of that Smothering Auras trait. Yeah, I don't really have any gap closers right now. The 2 is up, so I can do the static field. Yep, and an easy kill right there with the combo. I have to be careful because the Rev is here. And I use the Fire Evade to get some distance after they port on me. And yep, just abusing the no port spots again, which is really nice for Staff Ellie. And at this point, my Rev has used their heal. They're pretty pressured. So I kind of want to, like, I have to be safe, but I kind of want to, like, be kind of aggressive here with my positioning, because then my Revenant will die if I don't give them enough presence, and right, then I'll die. So I need to play a little bit riskier than I'm comfortable here. And they eventually do kind of get hit by a bunch of AoEs that I'm spamming, and we actually win this 2v2. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, our warrior's splitting their team. He's doing his role, and our Fire and Scourge are at mid, so our rotations are working out now. And now that we've won that 2v2, I'll go to mid and try to snowball that a little bit. I do my Geyser to try to prevent our teammate from dying, and then, you know, I just Lightning Hammer to finish off their team. I can do the static field into lightning flash combo there. That's a really nice combo for getting kills there, because it sets up your positioning so well, as well as stunning them for your the 4 skill, which does tons of damage. So yeah, that's pretty nice. I use that a lot. If you notice, like, lightning flash is like used in every LE build because it's such a good skill. It could be a stun break. Like, even if it's not a stun break, it's such a good skill because it's just playmaking potential, right? So at this point, it looks like we're retargeting on the Necro off node. This is a pretty tanky Necro. He's running Death Magic, but still, it's not enough to survive a Rev. And I can see their warriors coming in. I have plenty of cleave if he does try to go for the res. And I put the wall there to prevent that rush. And I have to kind of keep kiting. And I'm going to cleave through the wall here. Yeah. So I don't have my lightning flash, so I can't really make a play here. But he is kiting me around the wall, and I can get a nice CC chain combo there. And he's going to full counter that and just run away. So he's actually kind of afraid of me, which is kind of weird. I mean, this is unranked, but normally a warrior just counters me by just running straight at me and pressing W. At this point, our team has mid, and we need to get one of the side nodes. So I need to play more aggressively here. And I start casting my Meteor Shower, and then I swap immediately into air. And Live Elemental Power allows us to pick up kills with that precasted Meteor Shower. We've lost mid, and they're respawning back in too far. There's a rampage there. I kind of want to support my teammate, but I can't swap into Earth to give prot, so I'm just gonna chase with Fire Greatsword. I didn't really get too much value off this Fire Greatsword here, but I'm gonna use the mobility to survive, so I don't get like bulls charged or something. I'm gonna make my way back in, And actually I'll pick up my second fiery greatsword here, just for the mobility, I guess, even though probably could have just not gone in there in the first place. And yeah, we're just gonna stay on this necro. Yeah, the greatsword 5 skill is really good AoE. It's like a mini meteor shower. And now I just see their team just kind of like go together to like support each other, and it's just like, oh my god, they're all grouping up for meteor shower. This is the dream. And then get lightning hammer 2 for quickness, and then the 4 skill, and then we get the finish there. And I knock the rev off the node with the 3 skill as well, which is really nice, right? Because I can help my team to bleed. And here my firebrand is really low, so I try to spam as many CC AoEs and support AoEs as I can, and then I go into fire for the big damage. But then I notice he's down, so I do the double geyser to try to hold the body long enough, and we actually get it down, but we get the res as well, so at this point we've won the game. So yeah, that's core Staff LE. It's pretty fun, not too good, but it's fun. Staff is just a really fun weapon on LE because it's so versatile and has the combination of use with conjures allows you to be kind of like really active with your skills. So it's, yeah, I think it's a really nice archetype that I think the archetype should exist more viably in the meta. And this final build is going to be a Weaver, and Weaver is actually kind of like a meta build right now, but I thought to myself, well, Weaver is actually not too meta right now because it's too sustain oriented. The meta is very fast and kind of wants to like kill things as fast as possible, right? So Weaver doesn't really fit into that because it doesn't do that much damage. But the value in a Weaver is when it can kind of like prevent things from killing it, right? So, and it can stall 1vx or whatever, right? So that's the one thing that's good about Weaver, but I think that not having enough pressure once you do survive those 1v2s is a detriment. So what I tried to do was make a Weaver build that could sustain and survive like the very bursty meta. So I went for like a Stoneheart Earth build, but I also tried to min-max the survivability while also getting as much pressure as possible. So what I've done is I went into serrated stones, and this is a Sage's Amulet build, so it's hybrid. So I went into serrated stones to get more damage to bleeding foes and more bleeding duration. You also get more toughness here when you're in Earth, and you'll whatever. And Earth skills will be reduced in recharge, and movement impairing conditions will be reduced by 33%, which is really good because one of the hardest counters to LE is chilled, because it puts your attunement swap on cooldown longer and it prevents you from getting to your skills that you want to use, right? So reducing chill duration globally like that with one trait is really good, and your Earth skills being on lower cooldown means that your number 2 skill, which is an evade, will be lower cooldown, which means you have more evade uptime, and your focus skills, which give you a ton of condi clear and even an invuln, will increase your survivability a lot. So this trait is actually really good, and one of the main reasons why I did choose to go Earth, right? Because the other variant of Weaver is like water, right? And that's just pure sustainability, right? There's no damaging traits in here besides maybe this one, which I don't think people take. So there's only like, this is basically like full condi clear and like sustain, but what I wanted to do was go in more survivability, but also to get more damage at the same time, right? So that's why I feel like Earth is really good because it gives you a ton of survivability with Stoneheart and the condition duration reduction, but also gives you serrated stones, which gives you a little bit more damage as well. So, and then Stoneheart is, of course, while you're in Earth Attunement, you cannot be crit. And this is really nice. I like this trait on Weaver because you have access to Earth basically every 4 seconds, right? If you swap out of Earth, you can swap back in after 4 seconds. Whereas if you're on Core or Tempest, if you swap out of Earth, you got another like 8 seconds until you can swap back in. So if you really want to keep your survivability up against the meta, which is very heavily based on like power and crits. If you look at the meta, it's Hollows, Revenants, and Warriors, right? So, if you get Rampaged, you just swap into Earth Attunement, and you can tank a couple hits, and then dodge the rest. You'll survive the Rampage. Whereas normal Weaver, if you get caught, you're pretty much dead. So it requires you to play so carefully, and often it changes your playstyle too much, where you can't really get in any pressure as a Weaver. So Stoneheart is really nice to help you. You basically want to swap into Earth, right, when you suspect the enemy's about to do their big damage. And right, like, not being crit when most of the classes in the meta are running like Demolisher amulets means that you're nullifying half of the stats on their amulet, right? They're using power, crit chance, ferocity, and toughness, right? Or something like that, or vitality instead of toughness, right? So you're basically nullifying half of their stats by doing that, right? So that's really good. The one thing though that I had an issue with on this build is conditions. So like Geomancer's training kind of helps you get rid of your debilitating condition, but there's other conditions as well that you want to get rid of, and there's not really that much Condi cleanse on this build because you don't go water, right? Or even there's the other variant, which is fire, right, where you can take lesser cleansing and then smothering auras, and that'll give you a ton of Condi cleanse, but right, that doesn't give you as much survivability versus power. So what I wanted to do was have a build that gave you survivability versus power and Condis, right? Because the meta does have both, right? There's Scourges, there's Mirages, and stuff like that. So I went for Rune of Ore. And what that does is it gives you minus 25% incoming condition duration and 10% extra maximum health, and then gives you some Condi damage stats as well on top, which is nice because Weaver is actually mostly Condi damage. So that's really nice. Yeah, so I go with Sage's Amulet because healing power is actually really nice with Weaver because you have a lot of regen, and regen scales with healing power very nicely, as well as I think your water skills. While you don't have water attunement for the Soothing Mist, you do have a little bit of healing on your water skills and stuff like that. So yeah, mainly you want the regen to tick you for a lot more with the healing power there on Sages. And then yeah, I go with energy cleansing because you want more cleansing, and energy is nice because it scales well with arcane, evasive arcana, right? Because when you swap into water and then you dodge, that also gives you another Condi cleanse. So yeah, you get a lot of your Condi cleanse from your attunement swapping and dodging into water. And then your focus 4 is your other Condi cleanse. The rest of it, you're going to want them all to kind of like wear off. So that's where Rune of the Aura comes in. And yeah, so in Arcane, you also get Arcane Abatement, which gives you more healing, right? That actually scales with healing power as well, I think. Let's actually see what it does. So Berserk Ami, it doesn't really scale that much. So yeah, it's mainly the regen that you want to scale. But anyways, yeah, Arcane is really strong because whenever you swap attunements, you get a boon, and that's mainly you want your regen, right? You get regen from going into water, and you get swiftness from going into air, and then you get protection from going into earth. And the protection uptime is actually really good because 5 seconds of protection is valuable, and like I said, you can swap into prot every 4 seconds, so you can almost pretty much keep permanent prot uptime because if you just swap in and out of earth, you can be really tanky. Like you can go earth, water, earth, air, earth, fire, earth, or something like that. And then yeah, you could pretty much have permanent prot uptime, and then you'd be swapping into your uncritable a lot during that. It give you a lot of tankiness in surviving those situations where you're getting Zerg, because this is a very Zergy meta, right? If you're 1v2, you need that really high survivability. And what's really nice is this build has 22,000 health because Sage's Amulet gives you a bit of vitality, and you also take Master's Fortitude, which gives you vitality based on how much condition damage and power you have. And notice here I have a lot of both of those stats, so it also converts a lot into vitality. And then on top of that, I get 10% maximum health from Rune of the Ore. So 22,000 health plus the toughness from Stoneheart makes me really tanky. You're pretty much, there's nothing that can one-shot you in the game. If you're in Earth Attunement, there's nothing that can one-shot you, right? So it's really nice. And then I have Elemental Contingency. This just gives you more boons. It would give you a little bit of protection. Mainly the Vigor is kind of nice because I don't really get Vigor from anywhere else that I could get from these. But the Retail is okay. The Fury is not really that good. So yeah. This is just an okay trait. You could go for Arcane Resurrection, but I feel that you're not really going to go for too many reses. However, that could be actually better because this isn't really too impactful either, but this could be impactful, you know? Like, there's a difference between something that could be impactful and then something that's reliably not impactful, but reliably has very little impact. And then Arcane Shield, I don't think you should take that. It's too long cooldown. So you get some boon duration here, and your attunements are lower cooldown, which is like essential on Weaver to have those cooldowns. I tried to go not Arcane on Weaver, and it just doesn't feel right. And then Evasive Arcana, obviously, you want to take that over any of these other things, right? They just don't. There's no reason. So yeah, in Weaver, I also take Weaver's Prowess, which whenever you swap into a attunement that you're not already in, which is pretty much every time, you're never gonna like double attune really. While you can double attune, you'll get 10% condition damage buff and 20% condition duration, which is really good because you have already pretty decent condition damage, so giving yourself some condition duration on top of that and even more condition damage is pretty good, like I said. There's like the stance trait, which most people take, which in my opinion kind of gives you like survivability, but it's on a 70-second cooldown and it doesn't really give you that much sustain. So I thought about taking this, right? The stability is really nice, but if you think about it, like, you do get a lot of stability from this because each of these stances has 2 charges, right? And then this one has I think this has 2 casts on it, right? So you get 2 stability from this as well over time. So you basically have permanent like 1 stack of stability at least, right? But the thing is, if you're getting CC'd, you can kind of just tank it with Earth Attunement already, right? And also stability kind of like makes you a target for Necros to corrupt and then fear you, and then you're in a worse situation than you were originally. So I feel that stability is not that important because Twist of Fate is such a really nice stun break, and you have many other ways to survive CC spamming classes. So yeah, I just feel that Weaver's Prowess gives you that pressure that you need, and you have enough survivability, and this doesn't give you, like, Weaver is pretty much like a statistical class, right? You're trying to beat enemies not based on like rotations or something like that. You're just trying to like purely kind of mash your face into them, right? So I feel that this allows you to do more damage and then have more presence in those situations where you're trying to like aggress on people. And then you get more statistics while in a certain attunement here. So it's actually pretty nice because when you go into Earth, you already get another 150 here, but then you get another 120 here from Weaver. So when you go into Earth, you have 1,270 toughness, which is pretty nice in my opinion. So on top of you being uncritical. And then you have Woven Stride. So there's a little bit of question between whether I'd want to have the extra barrier on dodge and the vigor when I use dual attacks, because I don't really get much vigor elsewhere. Well, I could get vigor here, but I feel that Woven Stride gives you so much more survivability, to be honest, because the effectiveness of swiftness is increased by 20%, which means you're moving faster than anyone else who has swiftness. So you can kite people and they need to be moving using like movement skills to catch up to you, right? If they're just sitting on top of you and you don't have any like cripple on you or anything like that, which by the way you lower in duration, if you just both have swiftness on you, it's actually, you're going to create more distance between them over time, and you're eventually just going to, by movement, evade attacks, right? And that's really strong. So I feel like this is like the most interesting Grandmaster, whereas this is just pure barrier and dodging, right? While this kind of gives you like play potential, and it also gives you like your regen uptime, right? Because the only other place you get it is from water attunement swapping, right? So having permanent regen is really nice because you have a lot of regen scaling with healing power. So that's nice. And yeah, just having swiftness uptime is really nice as well. So yeah, that's what I take in Weaver. So what is like the play style of the build, right? I mean, it's pretty normal to the normal sword dagger Weaver, but I'm using sword focus. So you basically want to go in with like your polaric leap, and then from there, if you can, bait off a couple dodges or something, and then you'd want to Gale Strike, and that'll CC them. And then from there, once you get the CC on them, you can use your Flame Fire 2, and then your Fire 3 in air or something like that. Your dual attacks will always be dependent on, your double attune, but usually you'll be in air, right? Air and earth right before you do Gale Strike anyways, so then you'll have the Pyro Vortex or something like that. And then from there, you can even have Gale set up into the Primordial Stance, and then Molten Armor at the same time, which gives you a lot of pulsing conditions, as you can see here. And yeah, your evades are on Earth 2 and Water 2, so always remember evade Earth and Water 2. So if you ever feel like you're in trouble, you just swap to one of those two and press 2. And your Air 2 and your Fire 2 are your more aggressive ones, right? This is support, and then this is a somewhat of a leap. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You should learn what your dual attacks kind of do, but for the most part, your focus skills are pretty interesting for utility, right? You can get Magnetic Wave and Obsidian Flesh, which is really strong because if you don't own the cap node, you can go invuln and not worry about like the progress of the node, right? Because you want to just kill the enemy to get them off the node. And then once you get them off the node, then you can worry about capping the node. So giving up capture point contribution is really not that bad on Obsidian Flesh, and it's especially good when you're surviving outnumbered situations, right? And then your focus 5 skills are not really that good, but this can give you a little bit of might, and your water 4 and 5 are just like chill and CC, right? Daze on your 5 comment, which is actually not that bad, and then swirling winds on your air 4 and 5, and then you have obviously gale, right? So a lot of the damage from this build comes from conditions. So where is your condition damage, right? Primordial Stance is actually the majority of your damage, not gonna lie. So if you see here, my burning duration is 3 every tick, and my bleeding duration is 9 every tick. So it's actually more damage to use it while in Earth Attunement. So yeah, I want to use Primordial Stance every time in Earth Attunement. So you'll do something like Primordial Stance into Gale Strike, right? And that'll do, look at the bleeds just from like that. 20 bleeds. And they're CC during this time, so you could be doing something like Fire 2 as well, and just covering those quantities up. And you know, from there you can do Pyro Vortex and stuff like that. So yeah, most of your damage you'll want to try to line up with a CC like Gale Strike, Gale, or you can even go into Weave Self and use the last ability. And what's really interesting about Weave Self is that you actually get a buff when you're in those attunements. So you get more condition damage when you're in fire, you get more healing, outgoing healing, and boon duration while in water. You get movement speed while in air, and you get incoming damage reduction by 20% while in earth. And that's really insane, because when you're getting outnumbered like this, sometimes like Stoneheart isn't even enough, right? So you need like to just get out of there, right? So actually using Weave Self and then going into air will give you like that effect that I talked about with Woven Stride, where it makes you faster than your opponents, so you'll just evade attacks just by moving, right? And I don't even have swiftness right now, but you understand that, right? And then if you go into earth, you have Stoneheart, you have the extra damage reduction, and you have the toughness from being in the 2 attunement minor traits here. So when you have Weave Self up and you're in earth, you're actually indestructible. So that's, well, not indestructible, but pretty close to. So yeah, it's the immovable object there. So that's really nice, and that's pretty much it. You wanna play sort of like a side noter, but this build it doesn't want to be in situations where, you know, you can't decap the node. There's obviously gonna be situations where you can't decap the node. So like if it's another Weaver, or if it's a Scrapper, you generally can't get the decap on those, right? But if it's a Warrior, Warriors are susceptible to Condi builds, so you can decap those. NGs, you can beat those 1v1 as well. So those are 2 matchups that you actually want to be in. And what's nice is you have Earth, right, which counters power. So you actually are good in those matchups, and even better, in my opinion, with this build. So yeah, I really feel like the Earth trait line is really strong in this meta. And so it's kind of weird how I say this is like an off meta build, because I feel like it's pretty meta, but it's not what people are running right now on Ellie. They're running kind of like this fiery thing, which has more damage but a little bit less survivability. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The only thing left is my choice of Glyph of Elemental Harmony instead of the Signet Heal. And the reason for that is just simply because it's a nice chunked heal, which you don't need to invest any like anything else into it. It's just 1 second cast time. So like if I was using Signet of Restoration, it would give me 258 per time I cast, which is a higher value for sure, right, than what's it called, Glyph of Elemental Harmony. But Glyph of Elemental Harmony, it just feels better because it's such a huge chunk heal, and you don't need to really invest like any of your playstyle into it. However, Signet of Restoration is still good. I just am not used to Weaver and like pressing the one skill that often, like even when I'm not in combat, so I end up not getting as much sustain as other people do. But like if they're like Weaver mains out there, they probably will want to use Signet of Restoration instead of Glyph, right? Because they're just used to using that. And I think it may even be better in that case. But for me, it just worked out that Glyph of Elemental Harmony was kind of better for me. But yeah, definitely both heals are good. So this heal is just really good in general. I mean, it gives you extra protection uptime too if you use it in Earth. So that's nice. But yeah, pretty much that's it. So in this match, I'll be playing the Weaver as a side noder, which means I want to take 1v1s, try to stall when their team tries to regroup, and just overall kind of split their team. So I'm going to go far, and what that means is generally I'm going to go against one of the, well, it's their thief, right? That's kind of a bad choice. Like, thieves shouldn't go to their home node to cap because this can happen, right? Like, I could push in and immediately make this an unwinnable matchup. And you can see that I immediately use my invuln because it doesn't matter if I'm contesting the node or not. As long as I don't get like instantly bursted by a thief, I'll win the node. And it's not like he's going to get the full cap anyways. So yeah, there's no way that he wins this, especially when I have 22,000 health and I counter him. The only way that a thief can win is if like they one-shot me or something. And as you can see, our thief went to cap our home node and died there against the ranger. So I kind of want to keep their thief with me. Like, if he goes to mid, he can outnumber my team and they could die, and then I'll get outnumbered afterwards. So I kind of wanted to keep the thief with me, but I eventually have to decide to, you know, cap the node. And now I'm going to go in, and now it's my job to watch the node. And what that means isn't to AFK on the node, right? It's to kind of go to another fight, but keep an eye on, using my camera, people that could try to take the node from me, right? So kind of being present in two places at one time, right? Because if I watch the node, it's the same as me AFKing there if no one tries to take it, right? So if no one tries to take it, then you know, there's no reason for me to be there. But also, if I just sit there, you know, it's going to be more incentive for an enemy to not try to take it. And I want to kind of bait people into thinking that they can take it, and then kind of rotate in and contest it before they can decap it, and then bait them into the 1v1s. And then I've successfully, you know, split their team and put myself in a favorable situation. And here you can see I use my invuln again when the Mesmer uses their invuln, because he's not contesting the node while invuln, so I don't need to either, so I can use the invuln for sustain. And here, yeah, just this matchup is me versus a like Mantra Mesmer, so there's like almost no potential for me to get one-shotted because I'm running Stoneheart, right? So tanky. And right here I get like a ton of burns on me, which I should be a little bit more careful there. I get like 11 burns and I almost die because of that. But I cleanse it, and now I'm kind of low, so I should be a little bit cautious. I use the double water attunement thing there. But yeah, I get one-shotted from stealth by their thief, and that's kind of unfortunate because I could have stalled this matchup for a really long time. And it's kind of sad because I'm new to Weaver, right? I mean, I'm not a very good Weaver player, to be honest. But, you know, because of that, I am looking at my skills and not paying too much attention to the map. And, you know, that's what I should be doing if I'm more comfortable with Weaver. You know, I'd be looking for who's coming in or where other people could attack me from, right? So, yeah, that's another thing that's pretty important in 1v1s is understanding more than just the 1v1, understanding the rotations of the map that occur because of your 1v1 or that could influence your 1v1. So this is not really a place that I want to be. Like, there's kill potential on the Necro, but there's really not kill potential on the Thief. I can't do that by myself, and not really on the support unless other people are with me. But I still try to put some damage onto the Necro, and I've got my Elite up, but they have stability, so there's really not much I can do here. And they port away right before their stability ends and my Elite ends, so I can't get the kill here. So at this point, we're kind of converging on the mid, but I really want to keep splitting their team, right? Because when their team is all together, they have a support, right, with them. And I want to make the situation smaller so that their support gets less value. So yeah, I immediately go to far, and I can see that there is a Necro and a Thief here, which means that most of their damage is actually here, but this is also a bad situation for them because it means they don't have any damage elsewhere, but it's also kind of good because they don't need the damage elsewhere, so they're actually going to just try to 2v1 me here, but it looks like, yeah, they're going to leave, and I get the cheeky decap there with the the lightning flash. And now that I've got the decap, I can play really defensive again. And at this point, I'm kind of out of cooldowns though, so I really want to be careful. So I go into Stoneheart. I use Weave Self, right? So I've got the damage reduction, but still I need to be careful here. My Invuln comes off just in time, and now my heal is coming off soon. I need to get that. I use triple evade right there, and I get the heal, and now I just need to get out. And I actually use Weave Self at the end there into stability, and I could have ported away and survived. So it was actually really close, and I could have survived, but I made a bad decision to... Because, like, if you see how low the Necro is right now, I could have actually turned around and actually got the kill on the Necro if I had landed that Weave Self, because it's a pretty long float, right? If I landed that, I would have went straight into the Fire 2, and I would have gotten the kill possibly in a 1v2, and that's a little bit greedier, but it's way more value, right, than just surviving. So, you know, it's often, you know, that's the kind of like decision making you have to do to win games, right? But the Thief does come in, and because the Necro is so low, he can get that kill and res me, and yeah, it actually pays off. So my teammates are actually kind of aware of the map a little bit. And now I'm watching far again, right? But not just staying on far, right? So I actually kind of wasted my Air 2 there. I could have used it to watch the node a little bit better, but it ends up that I actually, because of Woven Stride, I actually moved fast enough to prevent the Thief from getting the decap. And that's really good, because if the Thief gets a decap, it makes me stay here longer and allows him more time to +1 my team at mid. So he's going to probably keep trying to push me out of the fights like that, and my job is to kind of keep the fights as simple as possible without that Thief being in there, because if the more volatility there is in the fight, the more chance my team dies, right? So, and as you can see there, I get a little bit of chill on me, but it ends very quickly because of my Rune of Ore and Earth trait line. So that's really nice. It allows me to get back into my skill usage. And here I'm kind of in trouble, so I'm going to use Weave Self. And I'm in Earth, so I get the damage reduction, but I can also go into Air for the extra kiting. And it looks like the Mesmer wants to push into my node again. He gets a one-shot on my Mesmer, but yeah, I'm pretty safe here. Like, I think I'm pretty safe here. I actually didn't use my water too. That was unfortunate. So that was a really bad mistake by me. I had my water too, and I swapped out of it before I had it. So yeah, I could have survived there a lot better. Like, you saw how healthy it was, and then I got one-shotted. So I could have either been in... Did I swap to fire? I think I swapped the fire, so swapping the air would have been 100 times better, right? Because not getting crit. And then staying in water for the 2 would have been a lot better as well. So it's just like mistakes that you make. Like, I'm pretty new to Weaver. But even then, I think our team has had enough pressure on mid in that 1/2v3 enough to win mid, maybe. I mean, we have a thief and a necro and a guardian, so maybe they can get a kill. It actually looks like they're not able, so we're getting 3 cap right now, and I just want to keep splitting their team, right? Like, I can't get kills for my team fast enough for it to matter, so I'm gonna try to knock that necro down so I can get the decap, and I actually do get the decap, which is nice because now I'm not fighting on his node, and I kind of get value because I've split their team as well. And I'm going to go for the full cap as well, but that means that my team is outnumbered at mid, so I really need to get back in there and then watch, the fight and the node at the same time. And I know that they're not respawning because our team is not getting any kills. We're dying. So I don't need to worry about getting decapped. But at the same time, I do want to watch for the thief, right? So I don't want to use my air too. I want to use that to chase the thief back to the node. So, like, my team is all dead at mid anyways, so there's not really much I can do. So I go back to defend the node. And I want to fight them off the node, right? So I hold the Mesmer in roads as long as I can, but he ports to the node, which is good because now he's out of a cooldown, and I only use my air 2 to get back to the node. But as you can see here, I'm getting attacked by a Reaper and a Mantra Mesmer, which is heavy burst. So if I die here, it's pretty hard punishing because they'll rotate out to the rest of my team, right? I don't want these 2 characters to be killing my team. I want to hold them because that's their kill potential. That's their snowball. So I'm actually doing a really good job, but it is also really risky for me to be holding these 2 players here because I could die very easily. So I have to be very careful and not greed for the node, but I also don't want to be too safe because if I give up the node, then there's no reason for them to stay, right? I want them to stay. But my team rotates in, and they've used up plenty of their cooldowns, and now we get kills off of that, and that's really nice. So my team actually... they actually respawn, which is kind of rare in solo queue, to be honest. I have a teammate, kind of like react or kind of like capitalize on like you being outnumbered. So that's pretty nice. And I tell them to leave, right, because I want to split the team again, right? If they can't get kills at mid and they got like kills here, like I don't know, it just feels weird. They don't need to be here. And this is a winning matchup, like I said. I stayed in Earth, I think. I should have been in Earth there as soon as he goes in Stealth because it's a pretty predictable timing for burst. But, like, right, I still am so tanky that I can survive the one-shot and then resustain. Here I'm, like, battling downstate body, I guess. I don't know. I realize that my team is kind of winning the rest of the map, so I want to stall as long as possible and keep this Mesmer in downstate while I hold the node, because like I don't want him to respawn because I own the node. If he respawns, it just gives him more potential to take the node back from me, right? So I want the situation to stay as it is, not to make change, right? So I just keep him in the downstate. This ranger actually looks like they're very bursty, so I want to hold this player here, but I also want to be careful. I see the Sikkim here, and my invuln's up, so I can use the invuln. I don't need to use it when I'm low health. I need to use it to prevent damage. So when they're using Sikkim is the perfect time for me to prevent damage, right? So it's perfect. But now that I'm outnumbered like this, it's kind of dangerous, right? So I use the Weave Self while I'm in Earth for the extra damage reduction, and it looks like I'm going to survive this as well. And it looks like the Ranger has given up, but the Reaper's here too, so that's all their damage is basically jumped onto me at the same time. But because of that, we've still got the rest of the map, and we actually get kills at home too. So yeah, we get that victory. So it's kind of like understanding the role of a 1v1er, but also like understanding your mechanics a little bit. I mean, the build, I think that the build is kind of actually pretty easy to play compared to the other Weaver builds because there's a lot more room for error. But also, there are some changes that you could make to the build, like going for the stance trait or like the vigor when you use dual attack and stuff like that. So, I mean, play around with it, but the idea of it, you get it, like, you want to be able to handle power burst, and you want to also be able to handle condies with the earth traits, the ore runes, and the what's it called, Stoneheart. So, and then you want to get as much damage as possible when you know you have that survivability. So yeah, those are some nice LE builds that I've come up with, and I hope you guys enjoy them too, because theory crafting is kind of like half of the fun of PvP for me, at least, and builds and stuff like that. So